Who exactly pays for cheaper beef? Because if Trump can bring prices down 25% by flooding the market with cheaper foreign meat, that sounds great at the checkout line. But somebody absorbs that pressure. Is it the importer, the retailer, or the American rancher? That's the part of this plan I want to examine.
The president on Friday posted that his administration will allow up to 300,000 metric tons of ground beef to be imported without higher tariffs over the next 90 days. The president's claiming the beef would be sold 25% under current market value, which is currently at a record high of $6.89 a pound. There was immediate backlash to this announcement. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association said in a statement that, quote, flooding the market with government-subsidized below-market beef is not the way to rebuild the American cattle herd. The group also said the move sacrifices long-term stability for short-term messaging. Multiple Republican senators also criticized the plan on social media, among them Tim Sheehy of Montana, who said that he's advised the president against this course of action for a year. Deb Fisher of Nebraska said flooding the market with foreign beef hurts our livestock industry and undermines the long-term solution. And Tom Cotton of Arkansas posted that imported beef will only put more pressure on cattlemen, adding he's also advised the president against the action and is now urging him to reconsider. The president was asked about all of it on Friday.
We want to get the beef prices down, so we'll get them down a little bit. And that's what people want. That's what the voters want. And that's what I want. The ranchers are great. They're my people. I love the ranchers. They've done a fantastic job. But they admit that we need a little help and in order to get the prices down. So that's what we're doing. I don't want to say which countries, but there are a few countries. But they're going to be sending in the highest quality beef. And it's something that we need.
Not only do we not know where the beef is coming from, the president didn't explain how it would be discounted or where the beef would be sold. This is yet another political problem ahead of the midterms. I want to bring in MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Michael, you are in South Carolina. We are going to get there in a moment just because the president was just there doing a rally for Darlene Graham in the closing days of that special election. But let's start here on not just the response from the American beef industry, but also farmers and fellow Republicans. I mean, the fact that you've got senators who are really never critical of the president coming out on their own accord on social media, I think says that this really hits a local nerve. All politics is still local, but I mean, this is a misstep from the White House. What do you think ends up happening? Amid record low polling, a new projection shows President Trump's net approval rating is negative in 47 out of 50 states. According to The Economist and YouGov, Trump's net approval is minus 26. Then let's go state by state. The data shows widespread dissatisfaction with Trump, even in states that voted for him in 2024. Ahead of the midterms, Trump has a negative net approval rating in all of the states where there are competitive Senate races this year. Places like Georgia, where Trump's net approval is negative 31. North Carolina, it's negative 25. Maine, Trump's net approval is negative 31. Texas, negative 22. And in Michigan, Trump's net approval is negative 27. Not exactly what you want to see if you're Republicans vying to win in those states. It means they've got a lot of headwinds. But then add to that this: Republicans, ranchers, and beef producers are criticizing the president's plan to lower beef prices.
Let's start with something simple. Beef is expensive. You've felt it. I've felt it. Every trip to the grocery store, the number on the package keeps climbing, and nobody's wallet has caught up. So when the White House announces a plan to let in up to 300,000 metric tons of ground beef over the next 90 days without the usual higher tariffs, and Trump says that meat could hit shelves roughly 25% below current prices, a lot of people are going to hear that and think, finally. I want to be straight with you. I want lower beef prices too. I'm not here to defend $6.89 a pound like it's some sacred number carved into stone. That price is punishing regular families, and anyone who pretends otherwise isn't paying attention. So no, this isn't going to be a segment where I tell you high prices are fine, and you should just accept it. That's not the argument. The argument is about how you get the price down, and whether this particular method actually fixes anything, or just makes the number look better for 3 months. Because here's the thing about beef prices. They're not just a sticker in a supermarket cooler. That price is the end result of a long chain: the cost of the cattle itself, what it costs to feed them, how large or small the national herd is right now, transportation, processing capacity, labor at every stage from ranch to slaughterhouse to distribution truck, retail margins, and plain old supply and demand. Prices didn't get high because someone flipped a switch. They got high because that whole chain has been under strain for years, and the domestic herd has been historically tight. Flooding the market with cheap foreign beef can absolutely push the retail number down in the short run. Nobody's disputing basic supply and demand. But lowering a price and fixing a supply problem are not the same move. Lower prices sound great. I want lower prices too. But you don't fix a supply problem by pretending the producer doesn't exist. That's exactly what the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is pushing back on. Their position isn't protect our profits and ignore the consumer. Their argument is that flooding the market with subsidized, below-market beef isn't how you rebuild the American herd, it's a way of trading long-term stability for a short-term political win. You can disagree with them, but that's a legitimate economic argument, not just an industry group defending its turf, and it deserves to be treated as one. So you've got two things happening at once here: a real, understandable demand for relief at the checkout counter, and a real, understandable warning from the people who actually raise the cattle that this relief might be borrowed from their future. And that is where this stops being a grocery store story and becomes a political problem. To understand why ranchers are this uneasy, you have to understand something about their business that most policy conversations skip right past. Cattle economics moves on a completely different clock than everything else in Washington. A tariff can change overnight with a signature. A herd cannot. Cattle take time to breed, time to grow, time to be fed out to market weight. We're talking years, not weeks, from a rancher's decision to expand to that beef actually reaching a store shelf. Every investment a producer makes today, whether to hold back heifers to grow the herd, whether to expand, whether to just survive another season, is a bet on what prices will look like down the road. That's the whole business model. It's slow, capital-intensive, and built on expectations. So when the federal government suddenly opens the door to 300,000 metric tons of foreign beef, priced to undercut the current market by a quarter, that doesn't just affect this week's grocery bill. It reaches directly into the expectations ranchers were building their next few years around. Consumers might feel relief immediately, but somebody is absorbing the other side of that equation, and it's not the government. Are you lowering prices or simply transferring the cost to the American rancher? This is why you're seeing pushback from people who are usually nowhere near the opposition to Trump. Deb Fischer, Tom Cotton, other Republicans from cattle and farm states aren't lining up to say tariffs are bad or imports are evil. Their concern is narrower and more specific. Cheaper imported beef, introduced this fast and at this volume, puts direct pressure on the producers back home they represent. And let's be fair to the complexity here, because Stan doesn't do simple villains. Imports aren't automatically bad. Competition can genuinely benefit consumers, and nobody serious argues for a completely closed beef market. But there's a difference between normal trade competition and a government temporarily engineering a flood of underpriced product into the market. When Washington intervenes like that, even for 90 days, it owes an explanation of what happens to the people who produce that same good domestically. So far, that explanation hasn't really come. Cattle economics is slow economics. You can change a tariff overnight. You cannot rebuild a herd overnight. Now connect that to the America First framing this administration built its identity on. If the whole pitch is protecting American producers, standing up for the people who grow and make things here, how do you square that with a policy that puts those same producers in direct competition with a temporary wave of cheaper foreign beef? That's not a gotcha question. It's the actual tension sitting at the center of this plan. And now some of the people saying that aren't Democrats. They're Trump's own allies. This is where it stops being purely an economic story and becomes a political one. Because it's genuinely significant when senators who are usually reliable allies of this administration start publicly breaking from a White House policy. Don't oversell it. This isn't a mass ideological revolt. Nobody's talking about impeachment hearings over ground beef. What you're watching is something much more grounded and, honestly, much more predictable. Local political survival. A senator or representative from a cattle state can back the president on tax policy, on judicial nominations, on a dozen national fights, and still draw a hard line the moment a decision starts hurting the ranchers, the ag businesses, the workers, and the voters back home. This isn't ideological rebellion. This is political survival. There's an old line in politics that still holds up. All politics is local. National loyalty only stretches so far before it runs into the reality of who's going to vote for you next November, and what that person's livelihood looks like in the meantime. Watching how far Republicans are willing to follow this administration before their own constituents start pushing back tells you something real about where the actual limits of that loyalty sit. And then there's the midterm layer underneath all of this. Affordability has become one of the defining issues heading into the next election, and this White House has, at different points, downplayed the affordability crisis or pointed the finger elsewhere for it. But you don't launch an emergency 90-day intervention into the beef market unless you privately understand that prices are a real, live political liability. The policy itself is an admission that the pressure is real. I'm not going to stretch that into Trump lied about the economy. That's a lazier argument than this situation deserves. What it shows is a White House trying to manufacture a visible, tangible win before voters go to the polls. Cheaper ground beef in the next few months is the kind of thing people notice at the register. But manufacturing a quick result doesn't mean you manufacture it without cost. Fast fixes tend to produce winners and losers, and this one is no different. The consumer may win right now, the rancher may lose. And the Republican member of Congress representing that rancher is the one who has to answer for it back home. But the biggest problem may not be who is criticizing this plan. It may be what Trump still hasn't explained. Go back to Trump's own words on this. He said some countries would be sending in high-quality beef. He wouldn't say which ones. And that gap, not some hidden conspiracy, just a plain lack of detail, is where this plan runs into trouble. This isn't about suspicion for its own sake. It's about basic execution and transparency. And there's a real list of questions that haven't been answered. Which countries are actually supplying this beef? Which suppliers specifically? What inspection standards will that beef be held to? What cuts or grades are we even talking about? Where does it get sold? And to whom? Who's actually responsible for making sure that promised 25% discount shows up? Does that reduction happen at the import level, the wholesale level, or the retail level? Because those are three very different things, and only one of them puts money back in your pocket. How much of that markdown genuinely reaches the person standing at the meat counter versus getting absorbed somewhere in the supply chain? What's the plan the day after this 90-day window closes? And, maybe the most important question of all, what's the actual long-term strategy for rebuilding a stronger domestic cattle supply, so this doesn't become a recurring emergency patch every time prices spike? A temporary tariff exemption is not, on its own, a production strategy. It's a pressure release valve. It can genuinely bring a number down for a few months. It does not, by itself, answer why the American herd has been under strain in the first place, or what changes so that strain doesn't just come roaring back once the window closes. And look, if a family saves real money on groceries this month, that's not nothing. That matters, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. But the government's job isn't just to manage this week's headline. It's to think about what the system looks like 6 months from now, a year from now. If families save money today, but 6 months from now you have fewer producers, more import dependence, and the same domestic supply problem, then you didn't solve the problem. You postponed it. That's the real dividing line in this whole story: good short-term politics versus good long-term economics. Those two things aren't automatically the same, and this plan is a pretty clean example of the gap between them. Lower beef prices would be good news. But good economics is not just about making the price tag look better today. It's about making sure the system can still produce tomorrow. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I want you to actually sit with it for a second. Would you take cheaper beef now if it meant putting more pressure on American ranchers later?